The chandeliers blazed, cameras flashed, and power strutted through the ballroom, until one moment stopped it cold. A black woman extended her hand, professional and poised. The billionaire mogul's response? A smirk, a glance dripping with contempt, and a brutal turn of her back. She clasped hands with the white men beside her, laughing loudly, as if the black woman didn't even exist. Phones captured it. Millions would see it. What no one knew, she had just had. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Chandeliers rained golden light onto polished marble. Champagne flutes clinked like crystal bells, and power moved from table to table with practiced ease. Every laugh, every handshake was currency. Then came the moment that split the room in two. Danielle Brooks, tailored navy suit sharp as steel, extended her hand, polite, professional, unshaken. Across from her stood Rebecca Hawthorne, billionaire construction mogul, blonde hair gleaming under the lights, arrogance etched into every smile. Rebecca's eyes scanned Danielle from head to toe. The pause was long enough for everyone to feel it. Then, with a dismissive smirk, she turned away. No handshake, no acknowledgement. She clasped hands warmly with the white men beside Danielle instead, laughing as though the black woman in front of her didn't exist. The insult was casual, almost rehearsed, but the silence it left behind was deafening. Executives shifted uncomfortably. A few lowered their gazes, others exchanged guilty glances, but not one dared to speak. Danielle lowered her hands slowly, her expression calm, unreadable. Inside, she wasn't wounded. She was calculating. Because what Rebecca didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Danielle wasn't just another face in the room. She was the silent backer of the entire $5 billion project. And that single act of arrogance had just lit the fuse on Rebecca's empire. The brunch carried on, Rebecca basking in attention, boasting of timelines and legacies. Cameras flashed as she posed with executives, smiling for headlines that would soon be ashes. Danielle sat quietly, her eyes steady, storing every detail. Silent power, she knew, was the most dangerous kind. By afternoon, whispers began trickling through legal circles. One clause in the contract, almost invisible, allowed investors to withdraw funding within 24 hours if misconduct was proven. Danielle's name sat firmly on that clause. That night, as glittering city lights spread across the skyline, the video surfaced online. A shaky clip, only a few seconds long, but enough to ignite outrage. Rebecca laughing as she snubbed Danielle's outstretched hand, turning instead to flatter the men. The caption read, "She shook hands with everyone but her." By dawn, millions had seen it. The comments poured in like a flood. Still happening in 2025? The arrogance is painful to watch. Who is the black woman she ignored? Danielle didn't speak. She didn't post. She didn't need to. At sunrise, she drafted a single email. Funding withdrawn. Effective immediately. $2 billion vanished with one keystroke. The chaos was instant. Phones rang off the hook. Stocks plummeted before noon. PR firms launched emergency statements, but the storm only grew louder. Reporters demanded answers. Investors began pulling out, one after another, unwilling to stand by arrogance laid bare. Inside the boardroom, Rebecca's face drained of color as the CFO read the statement aloud. Brooks Capital has withdrawn all funding. Following investors are reviewing exits. Rebecca's voice cracked, desperate. How was I supposed to know? But the silence in the room was brutal. Everyone knew the truth. She didn't know because she didn't care. She had seen a black woman and dismissed her as irrelevant. That dismissal now cost her everything. By the end of the week, the $5 billion deal had collapsed. Contracts dissolved. Partnerships fled. Rebecca's apologies, teary interviews, carefully written statements rang hollow. The video never went away. It replayed endlessly, a permanent scar on her brand. Meanwhile, Danielle Brooks remained silent. She declined interviews, ignored cameras, and quietly moved her capital into new projects, ones led by leaders who valued respect, not just profit. The energy initiative she had once backed resumed under different leadership, this time without Rebecca at the table. Her silence was the loudest statement of all. For Danielle, it was never about one handshake. It was about centuries of women like her being overlooked, dismissed, reduced to shadows until the moment they reminded the world who truly held the power. And in that single act of withdrawal, she proved a truth the cameras couldn't spin. Empires collapse when they're built on arrogance. Rebecca's downfall wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a fiery crash. It was worse. It was silence, spreading like wildfire. Phones ringing unanswered. Investors gone. Her name whispered with ridicule instead of respect. The woman she had mocked in public, the one she thought invisible, had dismantled her empire without ever raising her voice. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't confrontation. Sometimes it's leaving. For Danielle, it was never about one handshake. It was about centuries of women like her being overlooked, dismissed, reduced to shadows until the moment they reminded the world who truly held the power. And in that single act of withdrawal, she proved a truth the cameras couldn't spin. Empires collapse when they're built on arrogance. Rebecca's downfall wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a fiery crash. It was worse. It was silence, spreading like wildfire. Phones ringing unanswered. Investors gone. Her name whispered with ridicule instead of respect. The woman she had mocked in public, the one she thought invisible, had dismantled her empire without ever raising her voice. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't confrontation. Sometimes it's leaving. And yet, the echo of her choice carried far beyond that ballroom. In boardrooms across the country, executives replayed the clip and shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Journalists called it the quietest revolution. Social media turned her silence into a rallying cry. And young black women, watching from classrooms, offices, and living rooms, whispered the same truth to themselves. Respect is not optional. Danielle Brooks hadn't just ended an empire. She had forced an industry to remember who truly holds the power to build or to break. If this story shook you, don't just watch. Like this video, share it so the truth spreads, and comment where you're watching from and what moment hit you hardest. Then subscribe and smash the notification bell, because every voice here turns silence into power, and together we'll make injustice impossible to ignore.